Okay.
Thanks, Hannah. So there'll be the question and answer section, and then you will have an opportunity to share your proposal ideas and get feedback from the project team and Cass from the Fund Circle in breakout rooms towards the end of the session as well. Please do stay on mute during the session, unless you, obviously, if you have something to say, then you are welcome to unmute yourself. Okay, so with no further ado, I will share my screen. Yesterday when I did this, I had some tech issues, but hopefully that won't be the case today. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Awesome. I think it's loading. Yes. Okay, so a whistle-stop tour of the fund and where we're at to date. And just to get us started, here's the year 2 overview. So we are focusing on various activities this year. There's whole community events and sessions that we're running. We have a leaders talk, the first of which is taking place on the 25th of April. Hopefully you will have seen that being advertised. If not, check it out. We have seed swap sessions throughout the year as well, and we will also be having a celebration session towards the end of the year, which is around September or December. We've got our huddles and our groups, so we've got 3 huddles taking place this year that are going to be promoted in the next month. So look out for those. We have sense-making groups that are taking place throughout the year, and we also have depth groups, which are going to be, we're going to be hosting those throughout the year. So please do get in touch with us if any of those things would be of interest to you, and we'll obviously be sending emails on the mailing list as well. And then the reason why we're here today is the practice fund. So the fund is now open for 2024. We have the first deadline for fund requests on Tuesday, the 30th. And throughout the year, there's going to be fund requests that can come in, and then the second deadline will be at the end of June. So this is the first batch that we're looking at now, and there will be a second batch in summertime. There is £125,000 available within the whole fund, and we're taking requests for funding up to £3,000 for each application. As I've just said, there's 2 deadlines for batch 1 and batch 2, which are on the screen. And all fund requests must aim to strengthen or deepen collective imagination practice. This is a really important strategic focus for the collective imagination practice community this year. We're also really interested this year in thinking about specific audiences and/or contexts. So please do keep that in mind when you're considering your proposal. So what did we fund last year? We made 36 micro grants last year, and there were all sorts of things that we funded, from learning journeys to toolkits to collaborations and sense-making sessions. And the topics and themes that we were interested in were also really wide-ranging. So community engagement, multi-species imagining, queer in climate, collective dreaming, and much, much more. And what you can see on the screen here is our seed planting scrapbook, which was where recipients of the fund were required to share their learnings from their projects or initiatives or groups. And so we now have this growing set of learning and insight reflections from the collective imagination practice community, which we're really, really looking forward to growing and developing further this year. So a little bit about the guidelines for this year. As I've mentioned, all requests must aim to strengthen and deepen collective imagination practice, and specific audiences and contexts we're particularly interested in. The eligibility criteria is you must be over 18 to make a request. You must be signed up to our mailing list, and you must be residing in a country where you can receive funds via Open Collective and WISE in conjunction. There is more information about that on our blog, and you can contact us via email to check if you are concerned that that's not the case for you. We will be funding requests from people who are contributing in some way to the practice community and that respond to our definition of CIP and to our prompts. And we're going to look at the characteristics of collective imagination practice in the next slide. We're looking at requests from individuals and organisations. And there's a list of what we won't fund. I won't read that out just because that is all in that fund guidelines link that I shared in the chat. So do make sure you have a look at that before you press send, submit. And so this is how we're describing collective imagination practice. We're really thinking about characteristics of collective imagination as opposed to a clear definition. But we're looking at practices that are practice-based. It's in the name. It's rooted in growing the capacity of people to see more possibilities and to shift perceptions. It's work that emphasizes the collective. We're not thinking about individual imagining, we're thinking about what can we do within groups. We're thinking about material change and shifts. So thinking about how we're speaking to power and resource and shifting things like decision making. And we're looking at multidisciplinary practice. So it could be somatics, working with the land, nature, and much, much more. And this is a kind of a prompt slide. So really thinking about the types of things that we will be funding. It could be things that serve the community, a collaboration or an experiment, documenting and sharing a practice, an event or a learning experience, and thinking about engaging with specific contexts and audiences. So a little bit more information there. And again, this is all that I've shared. And I'm also it's also on the mural, so you'll be able to refer to it as you're putting your questions in. And just to say, we have a strategic focus this year around building more visible and distilled outputs and outcomes, and really thinking about how are we directing those towards people who are holding resource, who influence power and who make decisions. So we're doing these 3 huddles are really focused around having local authority and central government folks connected with collective imagination practitioners. And again, more of those, more on those huddles will be released soon. But this is really important for us this year, is to think about how are we influencing power using collective imagination. Okay, so that's enough from me. We're going to have a question and answer session now. I will just share the mural. Let me just pull it up for you. And again, if you haven't used Mural before, don't worry. It's relatively easy. And if you're really struggling, you can just put questions into the chat. So the Mural link is now in the chat. You should be able to just access it by clicking on it. You might need to put your name in as a visitor. And you'll see a block which says CIPC Fund Support Session at the top. And you're going to have around 5 minutes now to park your questions that we will then group together and direct towards Cass and myself and Hannah. So what you can do, you can either go to the left bar, and on the second icon down, there's a sticky note image. And you can click on one of those and it will create a sticky note that you can then drag in, or you can just use the ones that are already in there. You can click into them and write into them directly, or you can copy and paste the ones there. So that's just a very quick introduction to Mural. So we'll give you around 5 minutes, maybe slightly less now, to just write any questions that you have. It could be specific to your proposal, or it could be a broader question about the fund. Pop your questions in, and then we'll start to group them. And then Cass will start to feed some to you, if that's okay. Awesome. If anyone has any questions, please just shout or pop it in the chat. Well, that music was nice, Helen.
It was, wasn't it? And then my internet fell over. I felt that.
Too much.
Yeah, too much muraling. My internet couldn't handle it. I
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
do that.
Some great questions coming up. Keep them coming. Okay, so one more minute to capture questions. Anything else coming through? You have 1 minute to put it on a post-it note. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Let's come back together. Thank you for your questions in the chat as well, everyone. We appreciate that Mural isn't going to work for everyone, so really appreciate you putting your questions into the chat, and we'll bring those into the platform. So there's quite a few questions around community. We have, what do you mean by community? What metrics of sharing with the community would you like to see? Can you tell us more about the specific audiences and contexts you'd like to focus on? I wonder, Cass, could we start with those, do you think?
Yeah. So when we are reading applications, we are looking for how other people are going to be engaged in the practice. So collective imagination can be a personal practice, and oftentimes folks are applying to this fund because they might have a creative practice that they really feel excited about, passionate about, and want to continue doing, and possibly want to continue to bring other people into. And so when we're thinking about like how to share and distribute resources, we're looking not just by like the number of people that you're bringing into, but like the intentionality of how you're bringing other people into the practice to ensure that it's not just like one person's practice and sort of resourcing that one practice that doesn't have as wide of an impact, and focusing more on how are we integrating different folks in the community into the collective practice. I hold community in a broad sense. It often is a like chosen people around you. It can be like friends, it could be family members, it can be folks that you are connected to because of a similar shared interest. It can be people you're connected to because of proximity. So maybe like people in your neighborhood, or maybe you're in a reading group, or um, any other kind of like hobby group that you might be connected to already. So those are the different sorts of community spaces that like we're open to seeing folks bring their collective imagination practice into.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Cass.
Cool.
Yes, there's some questions here which came up yesterday in the fund support session that we held, which was around if you've received funding before, can you apply? Do we have a preference for people who have received funding already? Could we speak to this selection of questions?
Yes. So you can apply if you have already received funding before, and you can also apply if you have not received funding before. There is not a specific preference for folks who did or did not receive funding. We're really looking at whether or not the applications meet the criteria that has been laid out in the Medium blog post and in the mural information that Anna shared at the beginning of this. And so some people had shared a proposal that had two components, and it couldn't all be done within one phase of the project. And so we gave funding to fund the first part of the project, and then encouraged folks to resubmit their application when they're ready to move to the second phase. And so we're open to like being able to fund multiple parts of the project as long as it is meeting the criteria, deepening and strengthening collective imagination practice, emphasis on the collective part of the collective imagination practice, and meeting any of the other guidelines that have been outlined already.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Cass. There's something around funding going forward, larger pots of funding, a bigger pots planned. So kind of projecting into the future. Do we have any idea of where we're headed?
We are continuing to raise awareness around this project and this fund, and hoping that other donors will contribute to the pot of funds. We're really excited that year 2 got funded, and so we're hoping that as we continue to grow and like get more folks into the practice, continuing to fill out the harvest form so that we have evidence to show that this is something that's really valuable, that's really meaningful for folks, and that we can share with other funders who would be interested in funding this work. And so in the first year, JRF was our first funder, and then there was another funder who was interested in funding more UK specific work. And so we're hoping that that continues to build as we continue to grow as a community.
Sorry,
Thank
Cass,
you.
just a little correction there. The second funder is helping with European applications, but not UK, excluding the UK.
Gotcha. The way around.
So if you are from Europe, not UK, there is some additional allocation for those people in those places. So well worth having a pop, I'd say.
Yes, definitely. Okay. I am looking now at yeah, like the kind of logistics around the projects themselves and access. So there's one question, which is, if our proposals are approved, how long do we have to execute the projects? And then there's something about the cost, if the projects need to be free to participants. So maybe we could speak to those.
So we are flexible on timelines. We will offer like a date for harvest sessions and reflections and learnings to be submitted by. And if that needs to be negotiated, please email us. We've had many folks who needed to change their date based on just capacity or like venue issues or collaborators needing more time. And so we really want to make sure that the projects are successful. And so if you do need more time, just please reach out to us. But we know that like by the end of this year, we the funds will need to be used and the projects will need to be executed. Can you name the second question that you had read?
It was about access. So proposed projects need to be free to participants.
That would be ideal. And I don't think it's an explicit requirement that has been named.
No, I don't
Thank
think
you.
it is. I don't think it is either, Cass. I mean, I think
Most folks do, but
most people do it free. I suppose it partly depends what the offer is. If you're sort of wanting to use the fund to subsidize some people to do it, it depends, you know, kind of it would depend on the proposal, but we wouldn't be funding something that is income generating for you, probably. I think that's probably fair to say, Cass.
yes, I agree.
If the costs, if you were charging people because that's covering the cost of the offering, that might be different, but as an income generating, I don't that doesn't quite sit right.
Yeah. Okay. There's something here, like a little grouping that we've got around what constitutes a collective imagination practitioner, which feels like a really good one to delve into or give a little bit more detail around. And then there's a question that speaks to that around, do the projects need to specifically engage the collective imagination community directly, or can it be with other communities? So maybe we could just respond to those next.
Hannah, do you want to jump in on the collective imagination practitioner question?
Not much, Cass, but I will. To be honest, you know, lots of you who work as artists with communities are doing this kind of work. I'm very reticent to give a definition. I think the point is that we are the methodologies, the imagination bit of it is about stepping out of linear, sort of more modern Enlightenment problem solving ways of thinking to create different kinds of ways of exploring questions around how our society can flourish and change in an unraveling world. So it's like what kind of approaches enable that to happen? You know, it might be using imagery, it might be using, it's usually about something sensory that speaks to the knowledge of the body more than the knowledge of the head. Yeah, usually that's what we're talking about. Something that asks us to get into that space of body knowing and being emergent and exploratory and playful in our how we learn, rather than trying to sort of technically fix a problem or analyze something. It's going sort of outside of the analytical, more left brain way of working and allowing us to be in the more right brain, connecting to all things and the wisdom that's in all things way of thinking. So a practitioner means someone who wants to give that a go with a group of people. This might be your first effort. Go for it.
And then I can speak to the second question. Do they need to specifically engage in the CIP community directly? They do not. We are able to share if the CIP community is your audience, but if you have an entirely different audience that you want to engage, that's totally fine, and we encourage it.
Great. A question here about if there a duplication or reinforcement of topics that have been covered by huddles already in the micro grants, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think it's either. I think we're open to reading the application just because it is a topic that's already been included in the huddle doesn't mean that it's not a topic that's worth exploring again or in a different context. So if you have an idea that you see has already been done, you might have a unique spin on it, and we would love to read it.
Right, thank you. Okay, we're getting through these. I think there's some really interesting there's more specific questions that we have from people who are sharing what they want to apply for the funding for, which we could speak to a couple of. Yeah, so just to get us started in this grouping, there's a question around championing XR, VR, and digital 3D formats. Are we championing those formats specifically?
I don't think that there is a preference. We have funded both digital formats as well as in-person formats. So if you are in the digital realm and you want to apply collective imagination practice to the digital realm, we're really excited to see that because that's a trajectory that the world is moving into. And if you have an in-person collective imagination practice, we also want to see that too because different formats lend to different kinds of interactions.
Thank you. And I think that just speaks to the question, are you particularly looking for virtual versus land-based work? So like you're saying, Cass, there's space for both of those approaches here.
Yeah.
We have one around development time, including developing web presence, comms material, paying for specialist advisors to help roll out and offer an existing collective imagination tool internationally. So that's taking something that already exists and helping to roll it out. How would that be received by the Fund Circle?
We're definitely open to it. We in the last round, we actually reached out to some folks and said, hey, this is a great idea. And we noticed you didn't factor in your own time to pay yourself, or you didn't factor in time to pay, the folks who are helping you. And so we want to make sure that gets covered too. So development time is definitely something that we're open to funding, and just wanting, it just would be helpful to have as explicit as possible how collective imagination tool that exists is going to engage the collective imagination community internationally. So how does the tool interact with the community as it gets rolled out?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think we're coming to the end of this section, so I'll just I can maybe cover one more question. I wonder, Cass, is there anything that you've spotted that you'd like to give a response to that feels particularly pertinent?
I see one that says, can I submit more than one application? I would encourage submitting just one. And if you have multiple ideas, consider submitting them in different, there's two rounds. And so we will only fund one per round. So whatever one you think is the strongest, please submit that. Should I send the proposal only to one email? There's an application form, so please use that so it does not get lost. And then do I have to share the proposal through a blog or Medium account? No, there is a form. So please use the form, the Google form that has all of the questions so that all of the application materials get submitted in one place. And yes, you can send multiple files if you believe those files will support your application helping us get a clear sense of what your application is about.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Cass. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the Q&A section now. We're going to put you into breakout rooms. There will be myself, Hannah, and Cass in each of those breakout rooms, as well as a collection of fellow collective imagination practitioners, i.e. you lot. And the idea here is that we are sharing the ideas that we have for our proposal. So because of the time, we'll be in the breakout rooms for around 15 minutes. There won't be loads of time, obviously, to go in depth on feedback on your particular idea. So what we found yesterday, it was just a really generative space to understand what's the landscape of ideas that are coming through and being unearthed through this process. So hopefully you find it useful just to hear from your co-imaginers what's happening in the landscape. So I'll open the rooms now. I just want to make sure they're set to 15 minutes. And then, yeah, you can start sharing. Okay, thanks so much, everyone.